Welcome to the Reality Revolution. Today, we're going to talk about prosperity. Two particular teachers that I really enjoy that we have read recently, Florence Scovel Shinn and Orison Swett Marden, talk about prosperity. Check out my recent episode from Orison Swett Marden, a fantastic New Thought author who was the originator of Success magazine and is just a great author. And one of my favorite books is How to Get What You Want. And I have a great episode from How to Get What You Want, so check that out. And Florence Scovel Shinn, I have an episode on how to attract a specific person. Now, in this one, I wanted to bring together some teachings from both of them that talk about prosperity. It's never too much information to read about how to attract prosperity. Sometimes this information seems repetitive. When you read Think and Grow Rich and you read these different prosperity chapters and books and lectures, it may feel like it's repetitive, but it's not. A lot of these teachings come from different perspectives, and there's always a nuance that are added in. The best lectures of Neville Goddard are how to gain prosperity or to attract money in short periods of time. But I really enjoyed the chapter, How to Attract Prosperity from How to Get What You Want, in Orison Swett Marden's book, and the chapter on the law of prosperity from Florence Scovel Shinn's The Game of Life. Orison Swett Marden explains in How to Attract Prosperity, fears and doubts repel prosperity. Abundance cannot get to a person who holds such a mental attitude. Things that are unlike in the mental realm repel one another. Trying to become prosperous while always talking poverty, thinking poverty, dreading it, predicting that you will always be poor is like trying to cure disease by always thinking about it, picturing it, visualizing it, believing that you are always going to be sick, that you never can be cured. Nothing can attract prosperity but that which has an affinity for it. The prosperous thought, the prosperous conviction, the prosperity faith, the prosperity ambition. Opulence follows a law as strict as that of mathematics. If we obey the law, we get the opulent flow. If we disobey the law, we cut off the flow. Most of us tap the great life supply by inserting a half-inch pipe and then pinch even with our doubts, fears, and uncertainties. There is no lack in him in whom all fullness lies. The pinching, the limitation is in ourselves. For he satisfieth the longing soul and filleth the hungry soul with good things. We must conquer inward poverty before we can conquer outward poverty. True prosperity is the inward consciousness of spiritual opulence, wholeness, completeness. We cannot feel poor when we are conscious of being enveloped in the all supply. That God is our partner, our shepherd, and that we cannot want. A poor woman who had all her life previously lived in the back country moved to a progressive village where, to her great surprise, she found that her new home was lighted by electricity. She knew nothing about electricity. She had never even seen an electric light before, and the little 8-candle power electric bulbs with which the house was fitted seemed very marvelous to her. Later, a man came along one day selling a new kind of electric bulb and asked the woman to allow him to replace one of her small bulbs with one of his new 60 candle power bulbs, just to show her what it would do. She consented, and when the electricity was turned on, she stood transfixed. It seemed to her nothing short of magic that such a little bulb could give so wonderful a light, almost like that of sunlight. She never dreamed that the source of the new flood of illumination had been there all the time. That the enormously increased light came from the same current which had been feeding her little 8-candle bulb. We smile at the ignorance of this poor woman, but the majority of us are far more ignorant of our own power than she was of the power of the electric current. We go through life using a little 8-candle power bulb, believing we are getting all the power that can come to us, all that we can express or that destiny will give us, believing that we are limited to 8-candle power bulbs. We never dream that an infinite current, a current in which we are perpetually bathed, would flood our lives with light, with a light inconceivably brilliant and beautiful. If we would only put on a larger bulb, make a larger connection with the infinite supply current. The supply wire we are using is so tiny that only a little of the great current can flow through. Only a few candle power, when there are millions flowing past our very door. An unlimited supply of this infinite current is ours for the taking, ours for the expressing. Multitudes of human beings go through life just as ignorant as was the poor countrywoman of the fact that there is unlimited light and unlimited power flowing right past their doors, ready for their use, and that they may use all of it they can express. They are getting no more from the vast resources at their command than this woman was getting from the electric current. They seem to think that if they are expressing 4-candle or 8-candle power, that it is all the infinite supply can give them, or all that they were intended to have. It never occurs to them that the trouble is not in the current itself, but in the small bulbs they are using. Millions have died in mental and physical penury, died weaklings, when they had within their own natures vast possibilities of wealth and power which were never utilized, because they did not connect with the source which would have enabled them to express wealth and power. Most of us strangle our supply by our pinching thoughts, our stingy poverty thought, our doubt and fear thoughts. We pinch or entirely cut off the inflow of prosperity by our poverty-stricken mental attitude. The stream of plenty flows toward the open mind, the expectant mind. It flows toward faith and confidence and away from doubt. It will not flow toward a stingy, pessimistic, unbelieving mind, a fearing, worrying, anxious mind. We must keep the current or the supply will be cut off. We cannot get a 60 or 100 candle power supply through a 4 or 8 candle power bulb. The stream of plenty, of unlimited opulence, is flowing right past your door, carrying an infinite, never-ending supply of all the good things that heart could wish for. If you have the faith that creates, the faith that believes the best is coming to you, you can reach out mentally into this great stream of plenty, the universal supply, and get material aid to build what you will. The supply is there. It rests with you to make the connection that will draw it to you. If all of the poverty-stricken people in the world today would quit thinking of poverty, quit dwelling on it, worrying about it, and fearing it, if they would wipe the poverty thought out of their minds, if they would cut off mentally all relations with power and substitute the opulent thought, the prosperity thought, the mental attitude that faces toward prosperity, they would soon begin to change conditions. It is the dwelling on the thing, fearing it, the worrying about it, the anxiety about it, the terror of it, that attracts us to it and attracts it to us. We cut off our supply current and establish relations with want, with poverty-stricken conditions. Many people who have become interested in the new philosophy are greatly disappointed that they are not making any appreciable demonstration over poverty, that they are not advancing their position in life, not improving their conditions as they had expected they would. Now, my friend, the law of abundance, of opulence, is as definite as the law of gravity and works just as unerringly. If you are not demonstrating as you expected to, you are probably still held under the bond of mental limitation. For there is no lack in him in whom all fullness lies. There is no limitation in the all supply. The trouble is you try to tap it with a miserable little half or quarter-inch pipe instead of a great big one, and the supply cannot flow through and flood your life with abundance. If you pinch your supply pipe with your doubts and fears, your anxiety, the terror of coming to want, if you do not believe you can demonstrate abundance, you will get but a meager, limited supply instead of the inexhaustible flow you might have. In other words, the supply pipe is pinched only by your own mental limitations, by your doubts and fears and worries and unbeliefs. You can cut off all the supply and starve, or by a great magnetizing faith, a superb confidence in the all supply, you can flood your life with all good things. The law of supply is scientific. It will not act unless all the necessary conditions are fulfilled. Simply believing in the new philosophy and still keeping your old life doubts and fear habits, living in your old thought habits of lack and poverty, inefficiency will not bring success. If you don't believe you will prosper and you don't practice what you believe, you will get no results. If you would reap its fruits, you must obey the law of supply, the law of abundance, the law of prosperity. Prosperity never comes by merely wishing or longing for it. Keeping your mind fixed on it, simply thinking of prosperity, will never bring it to you. This is only the first step. You must cling to your prosperity thought, your prosperity ideal, but you must also back it up with scientific methods, the practical, common sense methods which all successful men employ in their work. You might dream of abundance and prosperity all your lifetime and die in the poorhouse if you do not back up your dream with business-like efficiency methods. That is, you must be methodical, orderly, systematic, accurate, thorough, industrious. You must do everything to a finish. You must fling your energy, your heart, into your business, your profession, your work, whatever it is. One of the worst things about poverty is that it induces the habit of expecting poverty and failure, the habit of being half reconciled to its necessity. No matter how poor you may be, if you have the right mental attitude, you will not long remain poor. If you are determined to turn your back upon poverty and face toward prosperity, however your actual conditions may contradict this, if you really believe that you are a child of the Creator and possessor of all things, that you were not intended for poverty, but on the contrary, the good things, the beautiful things of life are for you, the life glorious, and not the pauper or the drudge life, you at once open your mind to the inflow of the prosperity current. Have you, who are beating against the iron bars of poverty, ever stop to think what marvelous things the Creator has everywhere provided for us, His children? Just imagine the entire universe, the great cosmic ocean of creative intelligence, packed with all the riches, all the glorious things, the magnificent possibilities the human mind can conceive. And then try to picture what it would mean to you and to all who are complaining of lack and want, if by some magic they could call out of this universal supply of creative intelligence anything which would match their desires, their heart longings. Imagine this vast universe, this ocean of creative energy, packed with possibilities from which human beings could draw everything which the wildest imagination could conceive. Everything they desire in life, everything they need for comfort and convenience, even luxuries. Also cities, railroads, telegraphs, and all sorts of wonderful inventions and discoveries. You will say, doubtless, that such a thing is too silly to contemplate for a moment. Yet haven't human beings been doing this very thing since the dawn of civilization, all up through the ages. Every discovery, every invention, every improvement, every facility, every home, every building, every city, every railroad, every ship, everything that man has created for our use and benefit, he has fashioned out of this vast, invisible cosmic ocean of intelligence by thought force. Everything we use, everything we have, every achievement of man is preceded by a mental vision, a plan. Everything man has accomplished on this earth is a result of a desire that has been preceded by a mental picture of it. Everything he has produced on this plane of existence has been drawn out of this invisible ocean of divine intelligence by his thought force. His imagination first pictured the thing he wanted to do. He kept visualizing this mental conception, never stopped thinking, creating, until his efforts to match his visions with their realities drew to him the thing he had concentrated on. We all imagine that we actually, of ourselves, create these things. We do not. We simply work in unison with the Creator and draw them out of the vast, invisible cosmic ocean of supply. But we must do our part, or there will be no realization for us. Just as the first step in an architect's building is his plan, so must we first make a plan or picture of the things we desire. The architect first sees in all its details, in his mind's eye, the building to be erected, even before he draws his plan on paper. He mentally sees the real building long before there are any materials on the spot for its construction. His plan has come out of the invisible, out of the fathomless ocean of possibilities which surrounds us. All of our wants and desires can find their fulfillment in this unlimited supply. This is a marvelous revelation to man, the significance of which most of us have not grasped. Only here and there is one who utilizes it in his daily living. But science is recognizing it. Edison says all scientists feel that about and through everything there is the play of an eternal mind. They are recognizing that this is the great cause. It is difficult to realize that every instant, under the impulse of eternal mind, miracles are leaping out from the cosmic ocean of energy into objectivity to meet our wants, to supply our needs. Most of us are not able to grasp the idea that there is wealth and beauty and unthinkable luxuries waiting here for God's children. And because of this, we do not materialize the things we desire. It is one of the most marvelous things in this wonderful plan of creation that we actually live, move, and have our being in this invisible ocean of limitless creative material, and that all we have to do to attract what we want is to hold the right mental attitude toward it and do our best on the physical plane to match it with its reality. Noah might have lighted the ark had he known enough. The force was there just as today. When we once get it firmly fixed in our minds that in this invisible world of possibilities is everything which matches every legitimate desire and ambition, and that our own will come to us if we visualize it intensely enough, persistently enough and do our best to make it real, we will no longer live in poverty and misery. If you want to get away from poverty, if you wish to demonstrate abundance, prosperity, you must form the habit of mentally living in abundance. Live in the ideal of what you want. That is, you must live the prosperity thought. You must hold the thought of abundance. Saturate yourself with it. Then the poverty thought cannot touch you. It will be neutralized because you cannot hold in your mind two opposite thoughts at the same time. And whatever thought you hold is a real creative force. The great majority of poor people are poor thinkers, poor planners, and poor executives. They do not think prosperity. They do not obey the law of opulence, and so they stay poor in the midst of abundance. You can no more attain opulence while holding the opposite thought than a youth could become a great lawyer by concentrating upon something else, thinking of other things all the time. The specialist makes his mind a magnet to attract the thing he is trying to attain. He dwells upon it, thinks of it, bends all his energies toward it, dreams it, lives it, and eventually draws it to him. In the same way, opulence, prosperity, obeys the law of attraction. The idea of opulence must be implanted firmly in the subconscious mind, just as everything else which we desire to bring about. To draw out of the universal supply must be impressed upon the subconscious mind by registering our vow, our determination there until it has become a fixed motive or actuating principle. Then it becomes an active influence in the life, an ever-increasing mental magnet that attracts the thing desired. Whatever we wish to bring about in the actual, we must first establish in the subconscious mind by a constant, positive, affirmative attitude toward that thing. It is because they understand the importance, the imperative necessity of this holding of the right mental attitude, that there is such a tremendous difference between the poverty of people who have imbibed the new thought philosophy and those who are still in the old thought. It is the difference between poverty with hope, poverty with courage, poverty with expectation of something better coming, backed by a faithful effort to improve one's condition, and the poverty which is accompanied by despair, the poverty that has no hope for the future, the poverty that expects nothing better, that looks forward only to more and probably worse poverty, more pinching, more want and suffering. Even the poverty with hope and expectation of better things is not a very comfortable state, but there is no despair in it. There is no real pain in it. There is not much real distress because hope sees the goal beyond the blackness. It gives a light that dispels the gloom of limitation by showing a vista of good things in process of realization. It is the poverty which is accompanied by despair, which sees no light ahead and forces men and women to drudge on day after day without prospect of relief or hope, of betterment that grinds the life out of its victims. This is the poverty that kills the spirit, that destroys the buoyancy of life, the gladness and the joy, which are the birthright of every human being. The poverty of those who have seen the light, who have gotten a glimpse of something better, the poverty which sees something ahead to work for, may be compared with the temporary discomforts which a family camping out in the summer may have to put up with. Knowing that their discomforts are temporary, that they make light of them. They do not impair their happiness, because they know conditions will soon change. They do not worry about their situation as they would if it were permanent and could not be remedied. There are multitudes of ignorant, undeveloped people who are like many of the squatters on the desert in the arid lands of the West. These squatters build shanties and cultivate little patches around them, raising a few domestic animals to help them eke out a living. They barely exist, and yet the very soil from which they hardly get a living is rich with vast potentials, possibilities of bounteous harvests, and the production of great wealth. If these people knew enough to mix brains with the soil, or if they would only settle somewhere near a supply of water so that they could irrigate their farms, they might live in luxury. There is nothing lacking in the land, but it must have water and intelligence to develop its resources. These would make the desert fruitful. Water and intelligence mixed with the soil would perform miracles of cultivation, where ignorance succeeds in producing scarcely enough to support a miserable existence. Not far from such ignorant squatters, I have seen a portion of the same desert land enriched by water and intelligent cultivation until it had become a veritable Eden of delicious fruits, vegetables, grains, and flowers. Large families were living comfortably on an incredibly small piece of land, whereas before the introduction of water, they would have starved on perhaps 100 acres. Most human beings live all their lives on deserts, which are teeming with marvelous potencies and possibilities, but for lack of knowledge they live in poverty. Their mental resources yield nothing, because they have not yet been developed. Some of us get a little irrigation into a corner of our lives and raise a few vegetables. Some of us cultivate a few flowers, and now and then we'll get water and inspiration and ambition enough upon a little larger section of his mental desert and produce something worthwhile. But very few human beings ever cultivate their entire resources. The new philosophy teaches us how to get hold of our resources and how to use them so as to get just what we want. It teaches us that the source from which all things spring is in the great cosmic intelligence which fills all space, and that is in the vast cosmic ocean riches inconceivable are waiting to be objectified and utilized by man. It teaches us that all these things will respond to the right thought, the right motive, and that we can call out everything we desire from this all supply. It holds that the reason why our lives are so lean, so pinched and poor, why our achievement is so limited, so picayune in comparison with what we are capable of, is because we do not draw upon the all supply. Our narrow, limited, dwarfed ideals, our poverty-stricken view of things, the limitations our own thought imposes, These are the things that rob us of power and keep us in poverty. Our achievements or our possessions can never outrun our convictions or ideals. We fix our own limitations. When a man gets lost in the woods, he cannot tell the direction in which he is facing, because he has lost the points of the compass. Unless a man so lost can see the sun and recover his bearings, he will walk around in a circle, thinking he is going in a straight line in a certain direction. He makes no advance because he isn't facing toward his goal. He doesn't know this, but after a while, when he finds he is not getting toward any opening and doesn't know how long he may wander about in a circle, he gets discouraged. Millions of people are lost in the dense woods of wrong thought. They are not traveling toward the goal of prosperity. They see no light, no way out of the woods, and they lose courage. They are turned about mentally and do not know it. If the people in the Great Failure Army today could only be given prosperity treatments and shown that they are in their present predicament because of their wrong mental attitude, because they have been working for one thing and expecting something else. If they could only be turned squarely about so that they would face the goal of their desire instead of turning their backs upon it mentally, an enormous number of them would even yet make a splendid success of their lives. That is all that millions of people who are comparative failures in life, as well as the complete down and outs, need to be turned about so that they would face life in the right direction. What a pity it is that in this land of opportunity and plenty, our government should not have institutions conducted by experts for the treatment of poverty sufferers, those who are obsessed with the idea that their poverty is unavoidable. These people are just as much in need of prosperity treatments as the patients in hospitals are in need of health treatments. Most of them are curable. They have only lost their way on the life path and are facing the darkness instead of the light, facing towards the poverty goal instead of the prosperity goal. Their mental attitude needs changing so it will point toward success instead of failure, towards comfort and plenty, opulence, instead of poverty and limitation. Mental prosperity treatments would kindle a new hope in their discouraged minds. An expectancy of good things would take the place of despair. A new light would come into the eyes of those poor people. And if these prosperity treatments were administered to poverty sufferers in every country of the globe, the world would take on a different appearance. The time is coming when the state will have trained specialists, experts in the law of mental opulence, to give such treatments to the men and women who are in the Great Failure Army, those who are headed in the wrong direction, those who have lost their way on the life path. But there is no need for those now suffering from poverty to wait for the coming of that time to be cured. Any intelligent person can apply the law and treat himself for prosperity. Mental laws are clear and simple. We know that the fear thought attracts more fear, the worry thought more worry, the anxious thought more anxiety, the hatred thought more hatred, the jealousy thought more jealousy, and the poverty thought more poverty. This is the law of attraction. Like every other law, it is unalterable. The poverty disease can be cured only by its antidote, the prosperity thought. You carry within you this antidote to the poison of poverty, of lack, of pinching, dwarfing, limitation. Use it and cure yourself. The prosperity thought will kill the poverty germ. Keep your supply pipes open between yourself and the infinite source of all supply. Don't pinch them by doubt. Don't cut off the supply by limiting, pinching, poverty, lack thought. Keep your supply pipes wide open by the consciousness of your oneness with the One, your connection with the all supply. Abundance follows a law as exact as that of the law of mathematics. If we obey it, we get the flow. If we pinch it, strangle it, we cut off the supply. Suppose a youth who had decided to study medicine and become a doctor should say to himself, I cannot picture myself as a success because I don't know anything about what may come to me. Perhaps I haven't the qualifications that make a successful physician. I may never become one. I may be a failure. I doubt if I am fitted for it, but I'll try anyway. Do you think such a timid, doubting, negative attitude would ever carry anyone to the success goal? Of course it wouldn't. The young medical student who is going to succeed is the one who pictures himself constantly as a successful physician, sees himself in a fine office with a lucrative practice, climbing to the top of his profession. He is constantly visualizing himself as a successful physician. Now, the same rule applies to the poor man who wants to become prosperous. He must picture himself as prosperous. He must obey the law of opulence by holding the ideal of opulence in his mind. He must saturate himself with the prosperity thought, the thought of abundance. If you wish to cure yourself of the prosperity disease, you should begin by giving yourself prosperity treatments. Something like this. Say to yourself, if I am God's child, I have inherited all the good things of the universe. I am heir to all supply, to the all good. Poverty cannot touch the reality of me any more than disease can, for the reality of me is health. Health is the everlasting fact, and disease, sickness, is merely the absence of the reality. Poverty is not my normal condition. There can be no lack, no poverty for God's image. All that my Father hath is mine. Repeat daily the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Follow this during the day with frequent assertions of your kinship with the Creator of all the universe. Commit these lines by Ella Wheeler Wilcox to memory and frequently say them to yourself vigorously and with the force of absolute conviction. I am success. Though hungry, cold, ill-clad, I wonder for a while. I smile and say, it is but for a time. I shall be glad. Tomorrow, for good fortune comes my way. God is my Father. He has wealth untold. His wealth is mine, health, happiness, and gold. All the good things you need are yours by inheritance. Claim them, expect them, work for them. Believe they are already yours, and you will realize them in your life. If you continually assert your kinship with God, your Father, to whom all things belong, and send out the vigorous thought of abundance, a generous supply of all you need, which is your birthright, poverty cannot hold you its slave. I was recently talking with a man who only a few years ago was so poor that he and his wife and children were reduced to a diet of bread and crackers without butter. They couldn't pay even the cheapest rent or buy themselves comfortable clothing. In fact, they were rapidly heading toward the ranks of the down and outs. Today they are living in luxury in a sumptuous hotel. They own a beautiful car and have all they need to make life comfortable. They do not appear like the same people who but a comparatively short time ago were in a condition of semi-starvation. Whence the change? Did someone leave them a fortune, or did they find a gold mine? No, nothing of that sort at all. They simply realized that their poverty was of their own making, that the cause of their miserable condition was entirely mental. And there and then, they turned their backs on the despair environment and resolved that no matter what appearances were, they would face the light and struggle toward it. As a result, they began in a very short time to attract better things. The whole family has now taken a new lease of life. The expression of despair and misery has gone out of their faces and is replaced by the light of hope and joy. There is just the difference in their appearance and condition between despair and gladness, between the hope and expectation of more of the good things which belong to them, and the fear of want, the misery of grinding limitations. Psychology is teaching us that all forms of discouragement, despondent thoughts of doubt, of fear, of worry, must be kept out of the mind, for it cannot create while these enemies are in possession of the mental kingdom. We are finding that in order to create, to build, we must hold a constructive mental attitude all the time, that we must keep all negatives, all thoughts of discouragement, despondency, of possible failure out of the mind. We are learning through psychology that we can produce only that which we can concentrate upon, that which we constantly think of, that only that which is dominant in our mind, whether it is beneficial or injurious, will be reproduced in our lives. Your mental attitude will lead you into the light or hold you in darkness. It will lead you to hope or despair, to a glorious success or a miserable failure, and it is entirely within your own power to choose which it shall be. Successful people, without knowing it, perhaps are constantly giving themselves prosperity treatments, success treatments, by encouraging themselves, by making their minds positive, so that they will be immune from all negative, discouraging, poverty thought currents, holding the success thought, the prosperity ideal, constantly dwelling upon one's successful future, expecting it, working for it. These are, whether you know it or not, success prosperity treatments. Take, for example, men like Charles M. Schwab. Ever since Mr. Schwab was a poor boy starting in life, he has been giving himself success treatments. He has held the ideal of prosperity. The vigorous, robust, determined to be successful, to be prosperous, has always faced the prosperity goal. If he had allowed himself to yield to the many discouragements he has had, never would have had been the greatest steel master today, perhaps the greatest that ever lived. This was written in 1920, I believe. But he always triumphed over the negative, destructive, discouraging thoughts by insisting on holding to the prosperity, the success ideal. Suppose that every little while Mr. Schwab should stop holding the success ideal and should indulge in discouraging, despondent thoughts, allow himself to get down in the dumps and feel that good fortune was deserting him. What do you think the result would be? Why, he would probably lose more in a single day by such negative treatments than he could neutralize in a week of prosperity treatments. Every time you indulge in discouraging and gloomy, despondent thoughts, every time you allow yourself to get down in the dumps or in the blues, you are tearing down what you have been trying to build up by your success treatments. By holding the prosperous thought, your attitude is hostile to prosperity, and your very atmosphere blights and strangles it. You practically say, "I long to have you, Mr. Prosperity, but I don't believe I ever will. You were evidently not intended for me, for everything I do ends in failure. There must be some strange fate that is keeping me from the success and prosperity I want. I really never expect to be prosperous, although I am working hard to get you, Mr. Prosperity. It is such a mental attitude as this that is driving prosperity away from multitudes of people. If you want to better your condition, you must get away from the conviction of poverty. You must keep the want thought, the poverty thought, and conviction out of your mind, for these connect you all the time with the poverty and the lack thought currents from other like minds. Multitudes of people, through ignorance of the law, condemn themselves to lives of poverty. They do not realize that every time they think or say that they never expect to get away from the clutches of want, that no matter how hard they work, there is nothing but the everlasting drudgery, grind, and poverty for them, that fate is against them and they are doomed to remain poor. They are confirming and strengthening poverty conditions. If we are ever going to enjoy abundance, we must talk abundance and freedom, not poverty and limitation. We must think abundance and not dam the stream of our supply so that we will get little drizzles instead of a generous flow. What would you think of a prince who should go away from his father's palace and live in a poverty-stricken environment in the midst of lack and want, and who should constantly claim that he couldn't do any better, that this was what was intended for him? You would say that it was his own fault, that there was plenty in his father's house, and that it was his any time he chose to claim it, that the fatted calf and the royal robe were always waiting for him. Yet most of us act just as foolishly. There is plenty of everything waiting for you in the all supply in our Father's house. It is yours by right of inheritance. Why don't you claim it? You cannot get it until you do claim it, any more than the prodigal son could enjoy his father's bounty, while he continued to put it from him and feed instead on the husks of swine. Prosperity, or opulence, in the larger sense in which we use it, is everything that is good for us, an abundance of all that is beautiful, uplifting, and inspiring in life. It is everything that will enrich the personality, the experience, the spiritual life. This opulence, which includes everything we can desire, is intended for all God's children. All we have to do to participate in it is to reach out into the cosmic intelligence with our thoughts, with our ideals, our aspirations, and attract our own. In the game of life, the great New Thought author Florence Scovel Shinn describes the law of prosperity, and continuing on the same theme. She begins by saying, "Yea, the Almighty shall be thy defense, and thou shalt have plenty of silver." One of the greatest messages given to the race through the scripture is that God is man's supply, and that man can release, through his spoken word, all that belongs to him by divine right. He must, however, have perfect faith in his spoken word. Isaiah said, "My word shall not return unto me void, but shall accomplish that whereunto it is sent." We know that words and thoughts are a tremendous vibratory force, ever molding man's body and affairs. A woman came to me in great distress and said she was to be sued on the 15th of the month for $3,000. She knew no way of getting the money and was in despair. I told her God was her supply, and that there is a supply for every demand. So I spoke the word. I gave thanks to that woman that she would receive $3,000 at the right time in the right way. I told her she must have perfect faith and act her perfect faith. The 15th came, but no money had materialized. She called me on the phone and asked what she was to do. I replied, "It is Saturday, so they won't sue you today. Your part is to act rich, thereby showing perfect faith that you will receive it by Monday." She asked me to lunch with her to keep up her courage. When I joined her at a restaurant, I said, "This is no time to economize. Order an expensive luncheon. Act as if you had already received the $3,000. All things whatsoever ye ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive." You must act as if you had already received. The next morning, she called me on the phone and asked me to stay with her during the day. I said, "No, you are divinely protected and God is never too late." In the evening, she phoned again, greatly excited, and said, "My dear, a miracle has happened. I was sitting in my room this morning when the doorbell rang. I said to the maid, 'Don't let anyone in.' The maid, however, looked out the window and said, 'It's your cousin with the long white beard.' So I said, 'Call him back. I would like to see him.' He was just turning the corner when he heard the maid's voice, and he came back. He talked for about an hour, and just as he was leaving, he said, 'Oh, by the way, how are the finances?' I told him I needed the money, and he said, 'Why, my dear, I will give you $3,000 the first of the month.' I didn't like to tell him I was going to be sued. What shall I do? I won't receive it till the first of the month, and I must have it tomorrow. I said, 'I'll keep on treating.' I said, 'Spirit is never too late. I give thanks. She has received the money on the invisible plane, and that it manifests on time.' The next morning, her cousin called her up and said, 'Come to my office this morning, and I will give you the money.' That afternoon, she had $3,000 to her credit in the bank, and wrote checks as rapidly as her excitement would permit. If one asks for success and prepares for failure, he will get the situation he has prepared for. For example, a man came to me asking me to speak the word that a certain debt would be wiped out. I found he spent his time planning what he would say to the man when he did not pay his bill, thereby neutralizing my words. He should have seen himself paying the debt. We have a wonderful illustration of this in the Bible relating to the 3 kings who were in the desert without water for their men and horses. They consulted the prophet Elisha, who gave them this astonishing message: "Thus saith the Lord, ye shall not see wind, neither shall ye see rain, yet make this valley full of ditches." Man must prepare for the thing he has asked for when there isn't the slightest sign of it in sight. For example, a woman found it necessary to look for an apartment during the year when there was a great shortage of apartments in New York. It was considered almost an impossibility, and her friends were sorry for her and said, "Isn't it too bad? You'll have to store your furniture and live in a hotel." She replied, "You needn't feel sorry for me. I'm a Superman, and I'll get an apartment." She spoke the words. Infinite Spirit opened the way for the right apartment. She knew there was a supply for every demand, and that she was unconditioned, working on the spiritual plane, and that one with God is a majority. She had contemplated buying new blankets when the tempter, the adverse thought or reasoning mind, suggested, "Don't buy the blankets. Perhaps after all, you won't get an apartment, and you will have no use for them." She promptly replied to herself, "I'll dig my ditches by buying the blankets." So she prepared for the apartment, acted as though she already had it. She found one in a miraculous way, and it was given to her, although there were over 200 other applicants. The blankets showed active faith. It is needless to say that the dishes dug by the 3 kings in the desert were filled to overflowing. Read 2 Kings. Getting into the spiritual swing of things is no easy matter for the average person. the adverse thoughts of doubt and fear surge from the subconscious. They are the army of the aliens, which must be put to flight. This explains why it is so often darkest before the dawn. A big demonstration is usually preceded by tormenting thoughts. Having made a statement of high spiritual truth, one challenges the old beliefs in the subconscious, and error is exposed to be put out. This is the time when one must make his affirmations of truth repeatedly, and rejoice and give thanks that he has already received. Before ye call, I shall answer. This means that every good and perfect gift is already man's, awaiting his recognition. Man can only receive what he sees himself receiving. The children of Israel were told they could have all the land they could see. This is true of every man. He has only the land within his own mental vision. Every great work, every big accomplishment has been brought into manifestation through holding to the vision. And often just before the big achievement comes apparent failure and discouragement. The children of Israel, when they reached the promised land, were afraid to go in, for they said it was filled with giants who made them feel like grasshoppers. And there we saw the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. This is almost every man's experience. However, the one who knows spiritual law is undisturbed by appearance and rejoices while he is yet in captivity. That is, he holds to his vision and gives thanks that the end is accomplished he has received. Jesus Christ gave a wonderful example of this. He said to his disciples, "Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh the harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are ripe already to be harvested." His clear vision pierced the world of matter, and he saw clearly the fourth dimensional world, things as they really are, perfect and complete in divine mind. So man must ever hold the vision of his journey's end and demand the manifestation of that which he has already received. It may be his perfect health, love, supply, self-expression, home, or friends. They are all finished and perfect ideas registered in divine mind, man's own superconscious mind, and must come through him, not to him. For example, a man came to me asking for treatments for success. It was imperative that he raise within a certain time $50,000 for his business. The time limit was almost up when he came to me in despair. No one wanted to invest in his enterprise, and the bank had flatly refused a loan. I replied, "I suppose you lost your temper while at the bank, therefore your power. You can control any situation if you first control yourself. Go back to the bank," I added, "and I will treat." My treatment was, you are identified in love with the spirit of everyone connected with the bank. Let the divine idea come out of this situation. He replied, "Woman, you are talking about an impossibility. Tomorrow is Saturday. The bank closes at 12, and my train won't get me there until 10. And the time limit is up tomorrow. And anyway, they won't do it. It's too late." I replied, "God doesn't need any time and is never too late. With him all things are possible." I added, "I don't know anything about business, but I know all about God." He replied, "It all sounds fine when I sit here listening to you, but when I go out, it's terrible." He lived in a distant city, and I did not hear from him for a week. Then came a letter. It read, "You were right. I raised the money and will never again doubt the truth of all that you told me." I saw him a few weeks later, and I said, "What happened? You evidently had plenty of time after all." He replied, "My train was late, and I got there just 15 minutes to 12. I walked into the bank quietly and said, 'I have come for the loan,' and they gave it to me without question. It was the last 15 minutes of the time allotted to him. An infinite spirit was not too late. In this instance, the man could never have demonstrated alone. He needed someone to help him hold to the vision. This is what one man can do for another. Jesus Christ knew the truth of this when he said, "If two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven." One gets too close to his own affairs and becomes doubtful and fearful. The friend or the healer sees clearly the success, health, or prosperity and never wavers because he is not close to the situation. It is much easier to demonstrate for someone else than for oneself. So a person should not hesitate to ask for help if he feels himself wavering. A keen observer of life once said, "No man can fail if some one person sees him successful." Such is the power of the vision. And many a great man has owed his success to a wife or sister or a friend who believed in him and held without wavering to the perfect pattern. Both of these chapters were wonderful, and I thought that they really told the complete story, especially from a spiritual level, of how to become prosperous and how the law of prosperity works. And while it's not complicated, it is important to understand that thoughts of poverty and fear thoughts, at the same time that you're having them, pinch off the thoughts of supply, which will help you to achieve your prosperity. Ultimately, prosperity is a spiritual lesson. It's funny because sometimes I've had people say, "Well, I don't like it when you talk about that prosperity stuff." But it's all a spiritual lesson. And the reason I talk about this stuff is because that is what people may be struggling with. You can create any reality, and if your particular reality requires that you have money, then you need to study the laws of prosperity. They're deeply embedded in the ideas of reality creation. And when you understand the flows of creativity and power that occur when you create prosperity, you learn about God and life and so much more. God gives us this lesson of learning how to acquire prosperity in the same way that we learn how to acquire love and health and so many other things. They are all related, but the lessons given here are very good. There's some great prayers that are given by Orison Swett Marden at the beginning. For instance, "I am success. Though hungry, cold, ill-clad, I wonder for a while, I smile and say, it is but for a time, I shall be glad. Tomorrow for good fortune comes my way. God is my Father. He has wealth untold. His wealth is mine, health, happiness, and gold." Another really cool thing I like is he's emphasizing, he knows if you're in a poverty situation, it's tough. But just the beginning point of embracing the idea that if you can change your thought, you can change your own prosperity situation, changes everything. It gives you hope. You avoid the ideas of despair and everything. The world becomes in a different hue. I like that. It's much like you're going on a camping trip. You know that things are going to change once the camping trip is done. And so that is a great visual image to understand where you're at. If you're in a poverty situation, just think of it like you're on a camping trip, and your true riches are right around the corner when you get home. The stories that Florence Scovel Shinn gave were great, particularly the importance of keeping your faith when deadlines are coming, and by creating acts of faith, by going out and buying a nice meal when you need that $3,000, or doing something to prepare yourself. When you do things in preparation, buying the blankets for the apartment. Every time I've done some symbolic act like that, a lot of times the big manifestations occur for me. And even in finding a specific person or relationship, if you're laying out plates when you eat dinner so that it's not just you, something about doing that and having the house cleaned and prepared for when somebody comes. That seems pretty simple, but that's the same idea. So I thought that these 2 chapters were great, and I hope they help you find the greatest prosperity, and that's what I'm imagining for all of you. Abundance overflowing. And Orison Swett Marden paints a picture at the beginning of the first chapter that we just read. A beautiful image that everybody has all the things that they want. And it's not shocking. It's a wonderful thought. And we can just go and get treatment for our poverty sickness. And if we understand that it's all about what we think, and imagine the whole world as prosperous, that is a wonderful thought for me. I believe it, it's possible, and we can make it happen. So let me know what you think. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.